Hello, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar presentation, Key Data Management Use Cases for a Fast-Paced DevOps World, brought to you by Trilio. I would like to introduce you to our presenter, Kevin Jackson. Kevin Jackson is Senior Solutions Architect at Trilio. Kevin is responsible for customer and partner engagement in the EMEA region, helping enterprises meet their data protection and DR requirements. He has 20+ years of experience in the system architecture and engineering with AutoTrader UK and Rackspace. Kevin has authored multiple books around OpenStack clouds and subsequently has been on the cloud-native architecture journey through Kubernetes. And with that, I will pass it off to Kevin.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lucy. Hi, everyone. As Lucy said, I'm Kevin Jackson, one of Trilio's senior solutions architects. So what that really means is I have the fun job of taking people through the wonderful world of Trilio. And today I'm taking you through how the world of backup and recovery was once a core function of backend IT and is now a core feature of a fast-paced DevOps world. Data protection is much more than backup and recovery. So let me introduce you to Trilio. So first of all, I should point out that Trilio has a number of products in its portfolio, but they're all designed around the same 6 key tenets that you would expect from an enterprise data protection solution designed for the cloud era. And so one of these features you would expect is to be agentless. Now let's think about that for a moment. In terms of traditional data protection platforms, there's a notion that you would have to add in extra tools to support this extra thing, this thing called a backup. It's something sometimes considered somebody else's job to back up your environment, but it comes into your world when you're asked to make changes to your deployed environment to support that backup. So at Trilio, again, we're designed from the ground up for cloud. We're fully agentless. So this means that you can literally just carry on working the way you want to work in your cloud environment, but now have features where you can just say, let's just back up this environment, let's back up this data as part of my cloud native deployment. In line with agentless, in terms of you want to make sure that we're not getting in the way, is non-disruptive. And what we mean by non-disruptive is the fact that we want to seamlessly do our job without getting in the way of your work. And so our technology, it allows us to get access to the data in a very non-disruptive way, and it allows us to essentially get in and get out without you noticing. So again, in line with agentless and along with being non-disruptive, we're very frictionless when it comes to this idea of backup and recovery. And these are key aspects when considering a backup platform designed for the cloud. Multi-cluster, multi-tenant, and self-service. I like to talk about these things together. So, both of these together really drive home the idea of cloud-native environments and usage of cloud-native environments. You yourself will have your own tenant or namespace on a particular cloud. That's where your world begins and ends. You own everything inside of those 4 walls of your tenant space or your namespace area. And so a data protection platform designed for the cloud allows you to continue to look after those applications and allows you to manage your own applications within those 4 walls. You create your applications, you now back up and protect your applications. And we do this with a fully integrated user interface. That's either through the command line or through the native interfaces of these particular platforms. I thought we could generate some buzz in that we're light years ahead when it comes to scaling to infinity and beyond. Can't you tell I've got kids, by the way? But that kind of talk apparently opens us up to some kind of lawsuit. So what I'll say instead is that we're built from the ground up for these cloud environments, literally from day one. what that means is, administrators don't want to be considering an important part of the infrastructure to be, and scale that independently of the core platforms where, people are performing the backup and recovery. We scale literally in line with how that environment grows. So from an administrator point of view, we scale in line with the infrastructure. And then from the users, the people actually consuming the cloud, well, we scale, seamlessly as you grow your business, as you deploy more applications, as you deploy more into those particular namespaces and tenants. So with Trilio, we scale effortlessly. The last thing, the sixth part of the secrets to Trilio and our portfolio is our open universal backup schema. Now, I think it's fair to say that people don't give too much consideration about the backup format. I think the main focus, certainly historically, is a case of, well, my application is backed up, and I can recover that application, or I can recover that data in some form or another. The actual mechanism and the actual format of that data being stored is of little consequence. But I hate to break it to you, it actually has a lot of meaning and a lot of impact. We use open source format data. We use QCOW2. Just a little background information for you there, but it's important to know because that allows you and allows a number of benefits when it comes to data protection of cloud environments. I mean, in fact, it's well known and well understood that in cloud environments, backing up to open source formats allow you a great level of flexibility and portability. And I don't think we like to talk about this too much, but when it comes to Trilio, and if something changed within Trilio, the key thing here is you can always get access to your data. There's not many tools out there where you can say that you can always get access to your data. And again, that may be of small consequence to certain crowds that may be on this call, but for people who are responsible for governance and long-term retention, the idea that you can unlock your data at any point over decades using open source tools does bring a myriad of benefits when you come to choosing a data protection tool for a cloud-based era. And you know what? We do this over the complete spectrum, from hybrid cloud infrastructure to a container-based world, based on, say, Kubernetes, to the public cloud, and all the way through the stack of OpenStack and virtualization on-prem and off-prem. So that's Trilio. So let's just concentrate for a moment on to really today's topic. Today's topic is more featured around the world of Kubernetes. And when you get our TrilioVault Kubernetes operator installed, or TVK as the cool kids call it, you end up with basically additional functionality to any Kubernetes cluster. So let's repeat that. This is a easy to install operator that works on any Kubernetes cluster. So what this means is you can deploy us on your laptop. You can deploy this on your upstream Kubernetes that you've got running on your laptop. You may have a Rancher environment, running in on-prem. You may have access to an Amazon environment off-prem. Wherever it is, you can get our TrilioVault Kubernetes operator installed, and basically we give you the ability to extend the capability to protect those workloads. And of course, we're an operator that brings this lovely user interface. This is a multi-cloud, multi-user interface, and this allows you from a single pane of glass to manage those different Kubernetes-based environments. When we go to protect your world, again, we have very low requirements. Not only were we easy to install, but when it comes to backing up the objects and the information and the applications deployed in Kubernetes, all we ask is the fact that the storage presented, in fact, any storage presented to Kubernetes is presented through a CSI interface. Again, everybody knows, these days that's the common interface to storage in Kubernetes. Gone are the days of the Wild West of how you may have managed storage over the last 6 or 7 years. And we can back all that up, and we can back it up to any storage that's presented as an S3 bucket or to an NFS export. And there's no limits there. You can actually back up applications to multiple places if that is part of your desired backup plan. And we don't care where you run your stuff, actually. Not caring, obviously, is a little bit of a strong word. We obviously do care about what you do. We do love you guys and girls and everybody out there. But what we mean is the Kubernetes, the TrilioVault Kubernetes product doesn't really care where it gets deployed. It will work on-prem, it will work off-prem, and you can back up workloads from one environment and recover to maybe your off-prem environment. You may be looking at migrating from one public cloud vendor to another, and you can use Trilio to actually sit at the heart of that migration. And then when it comes to package management, we don't dictate how you deploy your applications in order to satisfy a protection and backup of those deployed applications. We are very proud of the fact that we very correctly back up Helm-based applications, so that when it comes to recovery, we're going to be putting back that Helm-based release. That in itself, has obviously major benefits. We're not just picking and choosing some objects that just so happen to be exist within the Kubernetes namespace. What we're doing here is we're able to back up the Helm chart, recover the Helm chart, and allows you to continue your Helm lifecycle management of that application across this namespace, across those multiple clusters. Same with operators. Back up the CRs, we'll back up the storage, and able to recover them wherever you need those operators, if that's how you are managing some of your applications in your environment. Labels, standard deployment based applications. Of course, we'll be able to back them up. Again, there's no limits to how you want to use those labels to actually, direct the discovery of those objects that we can back up. Or you can just take a step back up those namespaces, have some kind of auto protection, an orchestrated way of onboarding people, protect those namespaces, protect multiple namespaces, so that when it comes to disaster recovery, you can recover everything about that particular deployment and multiple deployments wherever you need that recovery to be. So this is what we provide. We provide this point-in-time backup management, but we do it in such a way that we are that you can drive us using your familiar tools. So your kubectls of the world, your OCs. You may be preferring a web interface, or you might actually prefer your Argo CD user interface and pipeline management. However you want to manage the data protection, the protection of the workloads that run within Kubernetes, we can provide that feature and functionality in a very frictionless and seamless way, so that you can do recoveries to the existing cluster or to any cluster where you need access to those applications, either for testing, migration, or literally, to recover your business from downtime. So, in terms of today's webinar, that's all the background. In terms of today, we're talking about the day 0, 1, 2 challenges, and certainly what I'm not talking about here are some kind of 50-day 50 press-ups a day kind of thing, or some kind of like weird fad diet. We're talking about obviously the maturity and the progress of IT through day 0, day 1 to day 2 operational side of things. So let's talk around the personas that feature as part of this particular presentation. So I'm going to introduce you to 4 people. Now, I don't know them personally outside the day jobs. I'm pretty sure they're great people, but I know what they do and the challenges that they face every day when they come to work, and I'm pretty sure you recognize these particular challenges. So the first person I want to introduce you to is Lisa. So Lisa is a developer. Lisa is responsible for writing the code, building the apps, testing, and she relies heavily on the core infrastructure. She'll be checking in code to Git. and that code will be pushed into like various namespaces as part of the journey on to putting this into production. Then we have Brian. Brian loves his hoodies by the looks of things, and Brian is an SRE but sits on the dev side. So we've got dev on the left now, and Brian sits with Lisa, and Brian is responsible for that application being deployed successfully, making sure that it all runs. So Brian utilizes Git to ensure that there's consistency of those deployments, so that when it gets promoted all the way through the stack and all the way through to production, that there's assurances that what we've got running here is golden and is good to go when it comes to running stuff in the prod-based world. And then on the right-hand side, we have Rob. Rob, if I'm being really honest, looks a little bit too smart for operations, but there we go. Rob is the ops SRE. So he's on the other side of that coin when it comes to the GitOps. So Rob has the view of the world of the platform. He needs to make sure that the clusters and the platform is available, and of course has a say and a role to play when it comes to ensuring that the code that is developed by Lisa and is curated and pushed and make sure is running as it should through Brian. Rob makes sure that those production-based environments are running as it should, and the business, of course, continues to make money. And then lastly, we have Jane. Jane is Ops IT Director view of the world. So she has a bigger role to play. Obviously, she has responsibility all the way through the world. She ensures business continuity at the management level. She needs to make sure that the hardware and software obviously are fit for purpose, and the fact that she has that core view of the world of managing the IT operational world. And so her view of the world is making sure that if anything goes wrong, things can get recovered, in which case she then certainly breathes down Rob's neck to make sure that things are recovered in an appropriate manner. So in terms of day zero, so we're talking about the beginnings of the world here. We're talking about the fact that in the beginning there was test and dev based environments. So here, this is the world of Lisa and Brian. So Lisa obviously is developing the code. Lisa is obviously checking things into the environment. Brian is, of course, making sure that environment has all what is needed to run that particular code. And of course, this gets to a stage where this code eventually gets pushed into various stages as part of pipeline. So as we lead into the production-based world, we get to a place where we've got the code now running in a pre-prod type of environment. So Lisa's checked in the code, it's all passed all those CI/CD checks, all the gating has all gone to green, and now the code automatically gets pushed into another environment, which runs through some secondary kind of testing. And again, this is a world of Brian making sure that things are running as expected, and Rob has a say just what's coming down the pike in terms of the next steps, what's getting deployed into production when somebody checks that that flag to say yes, it's green to go. And so, of course, we end up in this world of production. So look, we've got the happy path here that the code was all put into test and it's all gone through fine. It's then gone through all the pipeline and all the integration, and now we end up in a pre-prod, in a staging-based world. And then from there, obviously, all the things checked has gone green, and we're now into production. So this is great. And the nice thing here is the fact that this organization deploys code to a Friday. So they've gone to the pub. So everything is all good because everything was fully tested. Well, not really. So there's a problem, but this problem doesn't make sense because we literally, I just literally spent the last couple of minutes just saying how great Lisa was and how tight she works with the likes of Brian. Brian just says, yeah, that environment works fantastically, and Rob is really happy that this code is being pushed to production. So what the hell has gone wrong? Well, if we look at this, and again, there's intelligent people on the call. If we look at this, obviously, if it's not the code that's the problem, and I hear you, it's not DNS either, and it's not the network. In this case, it was actually the data that is the issue. So, one of Lisa's challenges is having accurate data to test with. So in other words, it's all well and good having, foo@bar.com as part of the, the email addresses, but did they expect to find that plus symbol in there, and that plus symbol then decided to cause havoc, when some, database query was ran, or, heaven forbid, somebody put a, equals quote, semicolon, drop table, whatever, because somebody hasn't done, their checking. And I appreciate you will have picked that up. I hope you will have picked that up in a much earlier part of your pipeline. But this is reality. So we've got a world now where production is down, and it's determined that it's actually the data that caused things to blow up. So let's have a look at a different view of the world, in the fact that if you take the approach of a data-driven approach to your testing, you can get to a world where basically you're testing with real data. So let's bring TrilioVault into the mix. Remember, TrilioVault in the Kubernetes world, simple installation, something you can control and use using your existing tooling, very easy to pick up, and you can orchestrate this and put this as part of your pipelines. In fact, we have an example GitHub runner that will take you through very much this scenario. So I'd rather you pay attention during this call, but if you're watching on YouTube, that's fine. Go ahead and do some background looking. But we do have another set of documentation which will take you through our own GitHub runner of where TrilioVault fits as part of this particular pipeline. So by having TrilioVault for Kubernetes installed and some kind of like GitHub runner, when Lisa checks in her code, she can get access to dev data. So essentially, again, we're a little bit down the line here, but work with me. So basically, we can take this prod data from production using Trilio. This is the manual approach, but then we can obviously have this available into this testing environment. So at least the staging environment has access to this data. Oh, by the way, did you see the subtle scrub? I hope you guys and girls are scrubbing your data before putting them into a test environment. I don't think you want your 2 million subscribers to see your test newsletter email, when you should be changing all them to some kind of like DevNull email target. Either way, I digress. So in this world, we've got access to prod data now. So staging has the high level of confidence when it's moved to production. But of course, we can bring that back a lot further. There's no reason why you can't have a controlled world where dev have access to production data in a very controlled way. And you can do this in a highly orchestrated fashion. And that's the key thing. Remember I said, there's a lot more to backup and recovery when it comes to cloud. These are the reasons why Trilio exists. So now that prod is happy, when the code gets checked in again, it can go through all those same pipelines. We've got more accurate data that we're testing against. And we have that high degree of confidence now, much higher degree of confidence that when it gets to production, everything is good. And you're happy now with Friday deployment once more. But we're not stopping there. In terms of the team that I presented to you before, I mean, they don't just have a small environment. They don't just have an on-prem OpenShift or an on-prem Tanzu, whatever environment it is that they're developing against. This team has to manage the hybrid cloud story. This team has to manage the fact that their code not only has to run in those 3 scenarios on-prem using the same kit and same infrastructure, they also have to support the ability to have failover to clouds. There's an ongoing management discussion, of course, of moving to AWS, and Azure is also in the running. And so in terms of day zero and day zero testing, so we're talking the realms of Lisa and Brian here, you're able to take the code and the data generated from those development environments. In fact, you can take this from any environment and have these tested running on alternative Kubernetes clusters. It doesn't have to be on-prem. and it doesn't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be OpenShift to OpenShift. Literally here, you can have your, an OpenShift on-prem, and then your EKS cluster where the target is going to be. And the nice thing about Trilio, it's designed for these particular scenarios. When we talk of backup and recovery, literally backup and recovery, when we talk of cloud native data protection tools, is literally the tip of the iceberg. It's the stuff which you just think of, okay, yeah, that's the feature we're looking at, but put them far back into the process, and you get into a world where you're able to take workloads off from one environment and seamlessly be able to deploy into an alternative alien world. So the day one. So we're moving into the realms now of the GitOps type of world. So this is the realm of, somewhere sits between Brian and Rob, that kind of like universe where the platform is more important, and the actual running of the services are becoming, a challenge to keep up. So they chose GitOps type of approach to managing these environments. So in terms of day one, of course, we still have to have developers, so they exist, and they will be generating code. I know it sounds like a pain, they do generate all this change, but they do have to be managed appropriately. So in this case, developers, they will push their code to some code repository. Code repository obviously would kick off some pipeline activities, but this is where Trilio comes into its own. So again, with this operator now, with the ability for you to hook this into pipelines. So in this case, what you've got here is the ability to orchestrate and automate the protection or the backup. Take a copy of this environment and store that safely. In this case, obviously, it's a backup at this point. And this is no different to how Lisa would be consuming in day zero in terms of needing access to data. Obviously, the difference here is there'd be an orchestrated approach. The second stage of that runner will be to take that data so Lisa can consume and test against it just because she checked into Git or wherever her favorite repository is. Now, in the day one world, there's a slightly different view of the world. We need to make sure that this application is running as expected. So code gets deployed. So remember, we've taken a backup of that environment. We've now got code deployed. So if anything goes wrong, of course, we can revert. And of course, there's various ways to do that. In this case, though, the environment is such that the environment has gone bad. It's app and data. Something's not quite right with this particular deployment. So no matter what testing has gone in before, maybe you need to review those unit tests. Maybe you need to review those functional tests. Whatever it is, something has gone wrong, and we need to always cater for this. But it's okay. Prior to this change, we took an orchestrated backup. Nobody was involved. That data and that application can be reverted very easily to a good known state. And so that's what happens. Between the operations of Brian and Rob, it was determined that that was the best course of action before reverting and basically forward fixing with the code with a new patch. But it doesn't really stop there for the day one team. As organizations grow, as organizations get that little bit more complex, more tools get brought into the fold. And those tools need protecting themselves. So if you're self-hosting various tools that are important and key to the, to how you deploy and operate your environment, then they are critical components that also need backing up. So this is the traditional, we need to make sure that these things are protected. But one of the interesting things about using the likes of Trilio as part of this world, if you think about what TrilioVault is doing here, so yes, we can protect your workloads, but it protects your workloads because we're discovering the important information that exists around your application. We're capturing all that metadata and the state of your application at that point. So whilst the GitOps team of Rob and Brian are managing infrastructure because they're checking in some infrastructure change to some YAML, there is a slight doubt as to, well, are everybody following that process, or are we sure that when we deployed this change to this infrastructure on the 1st of October 2021, it's now 17th of November. are we sure that, that is all consistent? And, we're observing some strange behavior in the environment. And so with Trilio, if you think about what we're doing, we're discovering that state. We're backing up that state. You can compare that state. You can actually see the difference between the deployed expected state of your application versus the point in time capture of that deployed application. And we have a diff at that point. And so this is important. So, you're using GitOps to improve your world, and you're using GitOps to make sure that things run smoothly. But when things go wrong and you need to audit and you need to go back in time to work out when things were changed, and maybe this was just one of those 2 o'clock in the morning, temporary fixes that just never got put back as a patch to some YAML. Or it could be a little bit more, a little bit more suspicious. In either case, we've got your back. You can go back in time, you can get that point in time capture, and we can always revert, and you can always discover what that change was and what that change should have been. So on to day 2. So day 2, so let's be really honest. Day 2 is traditionally where backup has lived for decades. It's always the kind of afterthought. It's always one of those services where, we need to have backup. Something's gone wrong, and then you realize that we don't have a great recovery story. It's that insurance. Let's call it as it is. So that's where it's traditionally at, and it's the reason why TrilioVault goes to great lengths to fit into the day 0 and day 1 view of the world, and we can't just behave as a day 2 backup and recovery tool in the cloud era. But people do obviously have genuine need for day 2 operations, so we take it a step further. So whilst backup and recovery, I guess, is the low-hanging fruit when it comes to the expectation of a data protection tool, again, Trilio does not stop there. We give you the ability now to take workloads from a deployed cluster and allows you to redeploy, recover, migrate under duress, in other words, disaster recovery, those workloads. So with Trilio installed, you can back up your application from one type of application environment, in this case, RKE, for example, and then do a recovery to something else. You may be testing, some lightweight services. But hold on, you're thinking, well, that's different. We're just on a backup and then a recovery. Well, I'll take it a little bit further. We can do a backup and recovery to completely different type of infrastructure. So I mentioned this before. So how do we do this? Well, with Trilio, we capture all that metadata. So again, going back to that previous slide, we know we discover your application. We know how it's made up. We capture that state. But on recovery isn't just a simple, yes, just go and click this and things will just recover. We give you flexibility in that recovery. Absolutely, if we can put things back the way they were, that's exactly. You can just leave us and just one-click operation bring that application back to life. But where there's a need to take that workload and change the destination, change some of the details around that application to fit the target infrastructure, then you can define that very easily in saying some restore YAML or in an easy to understand UI workflow. But typically, and again, you could orchestrate this. Now, the big bad word of ransomware. So ransomware, again, it's the bad news part of the presentation. Ransomware attacks. I mean, look, everybody knows ransomware attacks are on the rise. So these are slightly old stats. I think they're about 3 or 4 months old. So I can imagine, a review of this actually increases the ransomware attacks. I'm going to also say as well, we talk of ransomware, but we're not going to certainly ignore malware as well. I think, a lot of the conversations I have, in fact, I think it's 50-50, are, equally worried about ransomware in terms of encrypting type of environments, as well as the other malicious side of things, which is Bitcoin mining and things of that nature, all in exactly the same bucket. Something in your environment should not be running in your environment, consuming your resources, and ultimately consuming your money. So yes, ransomware attacks are on the rise, 300 million cases, each year. And the sad thing is, you're dealing with people who have no ethics. So even if you paid those ransoms and just don't, then there's no guarantee that they would actually unlock your data. Now, there's a business model to say, actually, yeah, unlock your data, and it's, that word gets around. But still, I think it's starting to become law that you should not be paying these ransoms. But it costs a fortune. It doesn't have to cost this much when it comes to recovery from ransomware. And interestingly, as we start, and I do deliberately have a lot of A's and R's, and when I say start to come out of the pandemic, as we went through the pandemic, more and more people were working from home, and unfortunately, home IT is not as resilient as office IT. I mean, I guess there's people on the call who are probably, the other way around. They probably scoff at their office IT versus the racks of data. But on the whole, it generally is accepted that, the home office IT is slightly different with less firewall protection than say what you have in an office space. And so in that case, these people bringing laptops home and, and the mobile workforce, unfortunately, has led to an increase in ransomware and how people respond to them incorrectly. Now let's look at a scenario in terms of ransomware when it comes to, being able to recover from traditional type of scenarios. So this is a world where we've deployed, this application, Lisa's been good. She's deployed applications to A, B, and C. But oh no, we've got some malware that runs on our Amazon EKS cluster, and it looks like this ransomware is particularly bad because it turns your application pink. I have no, actually I have nothing against the color pink, but it looks like this is bad news considering they run alternative color applications. So this is bad. So their environment is infected, but that's okay. They can go to their backups to do recovery. But one of the unfortunate downsides to ransomware is the fact that it now puts backup tools as a target. So all those bad actors know that to recover from ransomware, it's just terribly easy. You just recover from backups. They never really thought of that. So what they've done is they've realized that was the easy, get out of jail free card. So guess what they do? They go and attack your backups. So in this particular scenario, yes, they can go to their backups. They don't realize that there are, the data on there is, hiding some malware. So of course, the recovery occurs. It's actually turned to green. So maybe this is even better than the original deployment. But oh no, it's turned to pink again. We've now got back into this world where this application should not be as it is. It's running the malware, it's running that ransomware. So let's look at an alternative approach to day two IT operations using Trilio. So in this case, we fully recognize that your backups are terribly important. In fact, we're underlining the fact that your data and applications are important. And so in that case, we support a variety of tools that'll make sure that those bad actors are staying away from that data. That's really important data, and making sure that the backup software is not the weakest link in your security. And so we support immutability and encryption. Now, of course, clever people on the phone and on the call, they will know that if we're just encrypting backups, for example, then that's okay. But all that's saying is nobody can get access to the data inside of those backups. But of course, ransomware doesn't care that the data is encrypted. It will just go and encrypt it with their own key. And so you're in no better place. Encryption protects you against a secondary part of ransomware, which obviously is exfiltration of data. In other words, stealing your data because the backups were the weakest link. And then, if you have paid your Bitcoin, or even if you haven't, they can hold you to some extortion campaigns because they've got access to all that juicy data that they should not have access to. So that's what encryption protects you against. It doesn't protect you from the fact that you may need to then still pay the ransom in the first place. But that's where immutability comes in. And so we support immutability. You can individually mark your backups as immutable on appropriate storage targets. And this allows you to basically have the guarantee that what we've backed up is genuinely not able to be changed. So in this case, if the environment turned pink again, then you can do a recovery, and it will be guaranteed that that application will go back as the correct deployed recovery. So our approach to ransomware is the fact that we recognize that it's not a single software feature. There's multiple angles that you have to consider, and so we have a more comprehensive approach to our day two type of protecting ransomware. And so when it comes to protecting of those workloads, we fully comply with what you would expect from all the expected frameworks. And it allows you to identify those workloads, allows you to protect those workloads, and allows you to obviously have the trust that you can recover those workloads. But one of the things in there as well, and I'm just going to make this point before start to wrap this up, is the fact that you heard me talk emphatically about our open universal backup schema. I said it has some great properties. It has some great properties in terms of space savings. Again, maybe people on the phone mightn't care too much. Honestly, there's a lot of people that really care about that side of things. But one of the things about having an open universal schema, the data format, not only does it allow you to get access to that data in any scenario you can think of, but it also allows you in a security context, allows you to scan those backups. So if I showed you the previous slide again, of course, you'd have those backups, and then you can bring your own tools. You can scan for malware of those backups. So yes, we can mark them as immutable. Yes, we can make them encrypted, but you don't know when that bad code was sitting dormant. It could be sitting dormant for many years and only get turned on a certain date, in the calendar year, and that is well known. That malware does do that. So again, having that open universal backup schema, that QCOW2 format, the data format, is incredibly an important feature when it comes to consideration of your cloud journey. So in summary, traditionally, we have taken a view of the world that backup recovery is a day two operation. That's where life almost began with backup and recovery. It's almost like an afterthought, but it's an incredibly important tool when it comes to everyday operations. And everyday operations includes a myriad of cases of why you need to recover workloads and why you'd need to have the portability of backups in this this QCOW2 type format and this JSON wrapped open universal schema. Having that full capability of being able to deploy or redeploy that application wherever you need it to go is vitally important for day two and beyond decisions in IT. But what we bring is the ability to go much more further back into the evolution of your journey. We start at the beginning. We give you the ability to orchestrate the data, the application, and the manipulation of data so that it makes sense for test and dev. We give you the tools that seamlessly fit into your pipeline that allow you to consume us, so it effectively gives you a much more a higher degree of confidence of that tested data as it moves through into production. And then when it comes to day one, the support of the environment, the evolution of managing the infrastructure using code, using the same lens and visibility through the likes of GitHub and other source code repositories, then Trilio fits into this world by giving you the ability to manage drift. It gives you the ability to manage migrations, and it gives you the ability to of course, the visibility into what is running and what should be running in your infrastructure. And if you tie all these things together, you can see we give a comprehensive view of day 0, day 1, and day 2 operations. So when it comes to the compatibility of TVKs, because I know you're itching to jump off and install this. So we support any Kubernetes cluster. Bring your own storage through CSI. Bring your own storage when it comes to the target. That's what we call where we're going to be writing out our backups to. And of course, we fit into all the ecosystem you would expect. We're part of this world. We were designed very specifically to work with, in this case, Kubernetes, and we support a myriad of applications and databases that you are, porting into Kubernetes, and we'll do this anywhere. So thank you very much. So I think we're now over to any questions. Hopefully you've been paying attention and you are more than happy to quiz me now on how we can fit into your world. So let me just look and open the questions. So I've got a couple here. Just bear with me. Okay. So I've got a question here, and it says, can I use Trilio as part of my Argo CD pipeline? So obviously I mentioned GitHub, a few times. Obviously it's very easy to have Git roll off the tongue, and things. Obviously Git is part of that particular pipeline process. But in terms of Argo CD specifically, yes. So when I talked of that GitHub runner, obviously that's just one small aspect of a pipeline. There's certainly no limitations of where you can fit this into your own use of Trilio and fitting us into your own pipelines. In fact, I very specifically, and I and a couple of colleagues were recently working with a customer this week that absolutely is sits in the world of GitOps, and they manage all their infrastructure through code changes, as you would expect. And they use Argo CD, and they used it to deploy Trilio across their multiple environments. And so again, you can see not only did I talk of the operational side of Trilio. Obviously, I touched on the fact that you'd like to get this installed. These guys were actually deploying this in an orchestrated fashion as well. So there's a lot of hands-off and gives them a high level of protection in a very much hands-off approach to managing their environment. Ooh, more questions are coming in. So in terms of this next one, it says, I can push my code to any environment. Why would I need Trilio? Well, yes, of course. We're not replacing your ability to push code to production. Our world is to ensure you have the environment and data you need as an additional feature of your pipelines and workflows. You can orchestrate your deployment using your favorite tool. But connect the recovered data to the deployed pod. So that was the example I was showing you earlier on. So I think of that scenario we had for Lisa and Brian. But of course, we're not limiting this to just DevOps. I sit into a bigger role, and this also applies to other conversations such as NFV and CNFs, where they orchestrate parts of their environment, and they can couple and join back up the recovered data in a very highly orchestrated fashion. And I think might have time for maybe one or two more. So we've got here, we have data in databases that exist outside of Kubernetes. How does Trilio work in that scenario if you are wanting to develop against production data? So yeah, I showed the scenario where we take production data, and I guess the assumption there is the persistent volumes, the data that's part of the Kubernetes world, and we can seamlessly and orchestrate that back into the day zero development kind of world. Well, I guess in terms of databases, there's obviously a few ways to tackle this, and I'm pretty sure DBAs, the database administrators, would have their own say on how they could use this for their particular own platform specific way. But from a Trilio point of view, we do acknowledge that that there is alternative ways, but for other people who want to consume this completely from a fully orchestrated way in the manner that I just showed, then Trilio is actually looking at how we can back up external databases. So databases that traditionally live outside of a Kubernetes cluster, and using the same tools and techniques from TVK, from TrilioVault Kubernetes. Specifically, we're looking at what we call hook scripts. We can actually grab that database data, and then using that same pipeline workflow, allow you to recover that database data to wherever database is required. So in other words, from prod data to cleaning it to putting this into development database. And I think might have time for just one more, which is, you talked about malware and infected backups. Do you provide tools to scan your backups? So I touched on this just at the very end, and I said it's a bring your own tool world, currently. So again, our just to reiterate, our backup format is open. It's open source, QCOW2. And that allows great accessibility, obviously in a controlled fashion. Let's be really honest here, not everybody would have access to your backups, but you'd have a process on there which allows you to say, okay, basically access that backup, that sacred backup environment, and then any tool can access those QCOW2 files. So you can have your scanning, your automated scanning that you control, and then you can have the assurances that those backups are secure and safe. But we're also looking at being able to have that literally as part of a Trilio workflow, and that's certainly work in progress. But for now, absolutely, again, this fantastic open universal schema. It's designed for the cloud. It's designed for how you want to consume. This is one of those features where you can just bring your own tool in this, and that will make your security team very, very happy. So I think I don't see any more questions. So I genuinely thank you for your time today. I hope that was very beneficial. And of course, we'd definitely encourage you to try TrilioVault for yourself, and then certainly give us feedback on how you're using these in your DevOps world.
All right, and with that, DZone would like to thank Kevin for a great and informative presentation. DZone would also like to thank Trilio for providing the audience with a great webinar. Lastly, thank you to everyone who attended today. We hope you learned something new that will help you in your developer career.